Hi, I'm Chanel, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. This is episode 37 of the Pipernell podcast. So I'm kind of a blob in limbo right now, but I knit, spin, design, and work in New Jersey, though that's soon to change, as you'll probably hear me talk about. So, yep, this is just my little corner of the internet where I show my various projects that have slowly taken over my life. So, on social media, you can find me on Ravelry, Instagram, and Facebook. Those are the best places to keep up with me as Pipernell, Pipernell. You can find my designs under the name Chanel Wu on Ravelry, so that's Shanel, last name WU. So, like the perfume, but with an S, thanks to my parents. And there is a Ravelry group for this podcast called the Pipernell Podcast. So just search that up on Ravelry if you're into keeping up with things on there. And there I post show notes, and I will be hosting a spin-along soon, as you will hear about later. So, today I have for you some news, and then I have a variety of projects to talk about. I actually have some weaving for, This is my first time having 3 crafts in an episode. Then I have my knitting and then spinning. So yeah, all the things. And then I have a quick life update just because I do want to give myself some space to reflect on what's been going on. And then wrap up. So let's jump straight into news. The first thing I want to talk about is that the roulotte shawl pattern is going to be released this Friday, June 29th. Today is the 26th, so we'll see if I get this episode uploaded before then. And if you're watching this after the 29th, the pattern is out. It is in collaboration with Toad Hollow, New Jersey. So they are a pair of sisters, Helen and Mary Beth. They have the Crafty Toads podcast, and they're super awesome. And they approached me to design a shawl for them, which they brought to TNNA and a trade show, and they got what I hear a really cool, a really warm, a really positive reception for the shawl. So they are going to be selling kits for the shawl, and it is exclusively available through the kits until October. So nab your kit with them and look out on Ravelry for the pattern. So the next thing I want, again, that's released June 29th, so you can go to, I imagine you can go to their website, toadhollowNJ.com, or you can convince campaign for your LYS to order some kits from them. So the next thing that I want to just update you all on is the Druid Circle test knit. So that is the test knit for my first sweater pattern, and it is just about it's a little less than a month away from the end and my tentative release date, so hopefully that will happen and go smoothly. And that's going amazingly. I love all of my test knitters, and they have given me some really useful, not just feedback, but insight into how people read sweater patterns, because I know I have a very, I have my way of looking at a pattern, and a sweater pattern especially, and following it and knowing how to modify it to my shape, but I get a nice look into how other people see patterns through this test knit. So that's okay, roulotte Druid Circle. Okay, last announcement I have is that yes, I am finally getting my shit together and hosting some sort of along, and I've decided to make it a spin along. So this is going to be the Summer of Skein spin along, which is going to run from now, whenever I post this, to the end of September, I want to say. If we really have fun with it, I will definitely extend it. So this whole idea is that, well, I'm going to be moving in the middle of this, but I do want to encourage myself to spin more through my move because it is very calming for me and it's a great stress reliever. And also, summer seems to be a good spinning season. It's usually nice outside if it's not suffocatingly hot where you are. And people like to spin outside or just, maybe spin indoors in front of the AC. But anyway, Tour de Fleece is July 7th through 29th. So that's a little bit too tight of a time frame for me to participate. So I thought, hey, I can host my own little thing. And then if people want to, people are definitely free to enter their skeins from Tour de Fleece into this spin along. I just want to spin along with some people. So basically the rough rules so far are I'm going to open up a Ravelry thread, where you can post all of your entries, and it's going to be combination chatter and entries like I usually do my alongs. And so you'll get a point for each 4-ounce skein that you finish and photograph and post to the thread. And then, I know not everyone spins, so I do want to include non-spinners in this, but in a way, support spinners. So you can also get a point for each knit or crochet project that uses handspun. And I'm going to kind of play it by ear on like what constitutes a single entry. Like if you knit a single like little coaster out of handspun, I would probably ask you to make like 3 of them to count as one entry, but we'll play it by ear. And so, yeah, that's going to be really fun. So I'll post that in the Ravelry group, pipernell podcast, and I hope you all join along and will enjoy it. That's all I have for news. So next thing is weaving. It's the first time I have a weaving section. So, as you may know, I am starting a PhD in the fall, and I'm actually moving out to I actually will be able to get start a month early, so I am starting August 1st and getting in some good lab time before the start of the semester, before classes get in the way of lab work. So by lab, I'm actually going to be doing a lot of weaving. So last week, well, the week before last week, because I was late in recording this, I was in North Carolina, in the Asheville area, near Maria of Ninja Chickens, though unfortunately she was out of town, so I couldn't meet up with her. But anyway, I was holed up inside the whole time, so I wouldn't have really been able to go out and be social anyways. So we are actually in Hendersonville, which is a town about 20 minutes away from the Asheville airport. Asheville seems like kind of the hub of the region, and I really hope I do get to come back and explore the area, because it seemed really cool. So this area of Western North Carolina this is my impression of it, and please correct me if I say anything inaccurate, has a strong heritage of fiber in textile art and trade. So there are a lot of historical mills in the area and just a strong tradition of craftspeople living and working in the area. So this, the place I took the workshop at is called the Jacquard Center, and it's just the jacquardcenter.com, I think. They're actually a pretty new organization, though the people involved in it have been around working for a while, not just in the area, in the community that I'm slowly getting introduced to. And they wanted to kind of create a series of workshops that opens up Jacquard weaving to a wider group of people. It seems like before then they were mostly working with kind of people in industry. So this workshop was open to whoever wanted to learn more about Jacquard weaving. So my classmates in the workshop were like studio artists or technicians that had been involved or were involved in like a weaving or like weaving instructors. I was a complete herb and didn't know much about weaving. I've played with a table loom before, and of course, like, I did weavings in like elementary school, but that was with a That was with a blunt needle and going underneath string on a cardboard. So I knew the terms, roughly I knew the terms warp and weft, but like how the actual mechanics of a more complicated loom worked, I didn't know anything. So, it was a trial by fire, and that's what my classmates referred to it as. But I think I kept up with them pretty well, because the loom we were using is a particular model by a Norwegian company called, sorry, the company's Norwegian. The loom is called the TC2. And the TC stands for thread controller. And 2, it's the second model of its kind. The first, the TC1, was more of a prototype. So basically, this thing is... I know terminology is a little hinky, and I'm still, learning the language of weaving. But it does produce Jacquard fabrics. I think it's a little inaccurate. I think it's inaccurate to call it a Jacquard loom, because the Jacquard loom was it would be something closer to what Monsieur Jacquard actually made in the Industrial Revolution, but anyway, it's the same idea. So it's a Jacquard. We weave Jacquard, so that the loom that you're weaving on controls each individual warp thread. On like a rigid heddle loom, you have the heddle, which controls a set of warp threads that you raise and lower all at once. And once you warp your loom and get it all set up, then that set of threads is just is fixed. And you can't really change the configuration of the warp, or which warp raises up and down. Correct me if I'm wrong. So because I jumped straight from toy looms to this thing, I don't really know how the looms in between works, like Dobby looms or rigid heddle looms. I would love to learn more about it now. But anyway, so this thing uses, it's been modernized from a Jacquard loom that was used in the Industrial Revolution, of course. And we got to see a modern Jacquard machine in an industrial Jacquard mill. So that was cool. So the TC2 raises and lowers each warp thread individually, and basically you can program the loom to weave whatever pattern you want by loading an image into it. And so this has to be a special image. You can't just load a random picture you download off the internet. You have to do a lot of processing, and we used Photoshop. Though I know there are industrial softwares out there that are actually that people designing for a mill would use, but Photoshop, like my instructor said, is pretty democratic. It's not an open source software, but it is fairly low cost, and doesn't require industry connections to really learn how to use and to obtain a license for. So anyway, you take your picture, and then you have to turn it into a black and white image. And for a black, so each pixel is a warp thread. Each column represents a single warp thread. So our loom was warped at a really high resolution. We had 3,080 threads going across. And it made a piece about this big. I have my samples that I can show you. And so that means that we always loaded an image with the width of the full loom. The software on the loom is limited. You can load in a smaller image and the loom will tile it, but it's not the smartest thing, and it'll just, it won't check for any errors between your pattern repeats. So it's safer if you prepare the image for the full width of the loom. So each column is a warp thread, and each row of pixels would be a pick. And so this is actually a piece, the first piece that I wove, and pick would be one like throw of the weft shuttle that was holding the yarn. And you can see this piece, I'm not actually sure which piece is, like which side is the right side, but basically you can see here these are using satin weave patterns, so you can float the weft over a certain number of warp threads. And so over here the weft is floating over the kind of highest number of warp threads, and then as you shift over, the floats get shorter and shorter until this fabric is now warp dominated, and you mostly see the warp with like little bits of the weft. The warp was super nice. It's a cotton, it's a mercerized cotton, so, and it was really smooth and fine. And so yeah, the loom, the density of the warp was 105 ends per inch. So yeah, you could get really fine detail. So my next sample that I wove, because I saw that the fine detail that people could get, I was just really playing around. Some people came with like concrete ideas that they wanted to execute. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to pick up whatever I can learn. So at the end of the first day, everyone had come up with their own design, and I took an image and practiced the processing that I talked about and choosing different weave patterns to fill different regions. And I thought it'd be funny if I wove some knit stitches. So here is my second sample, and it is indeed it did come from a picture of stockinette stitch. But one thing that we were learning about the loom is that the aspect ratio of the image might change from what you see on your screen. So one thing that you have to do is, and this loom is really meant for sampling. And it can be used for sampling for industrial production. So like if someone wanted to make like 30 yards of a fabric and they wanted to just test out their pattern first on this loom, they could do that. So when you sample, there's some trial and error, and we were all finding that our pictures were vertically stretching because of the way that the weft threads were packing down. They weren't super packing down. So yeah, but I still think this is pretty cool, and the backside is cool, even though that was not the intended. Yeah, even though it wasn't the intended side, it's still pretty cool because these are also satin weaves. And so when a warp floats over a certain number of threads, it has to ducks down back under, and you see like kind of the underside of it, which still makes a cool image. So on the second day, we learned about using 2 weft colors, and I'm sorry if I interchange warp and weft. Like I said, I'm still getting used to the language, and at this point, I'm still not like playing around with complete ideas, so I wasn't weaving like huge pieces. Some people were trying to build up to weaving like a 6 or 9 or even like foot long, foot tall piece, but I just kept weaving little strips and samples of like kind of techniques and concepts I wanted to execute. So this is a 2 weft system, sample, and I think they also called it a compound fabric. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but anyway, when I was actually weaving with this, I would basically zoom across a red thread, then zoom across a yellow thread, then now my 2 shuttles were on this side, so I'd zoom red and then yellow, and so I just alternate between red and yellow. And depending on where which warp threads were raised, you would see yellow on some some rows were meant to be yellow dominated and some were meant to be red dominated, and that's how I made this dual image. Again, also reversible, so you see where the yellow is dominant on one side, red is dominant on the opposite side. And it really built up to me being intrigued by this kind of double-sidedness. And then when we, the next day when we got to double weaving, that's like, okay, this is my thing. And it's a good thing that I ended up exploring double weaving, because it's probably going to be one of the most useful techniques that I'll use in lab. Because with double weaving, you can weave, pockets and like two fabrics, a fabric where the two sides have very different properties, which could be useful for something polarized, like in electronics, you have a plus side and a minus side. Anyway, so the idea of double weaving is that your warp threads are normally like this, right? So up and down. And the idea in double weaving is that you take half the warp thread, so basically every other one, like, you would take like 2 and 4 and designate them for a separate fabric, like the back half fabric, and 1 and 3 would be the front fabric. And so you can also have 2 separate wefts. So basically, like, weft 1 interacts with warp 1, and weft 2 interacts with weft 2. I don't know if my hand gestures are helping at all. But yeah, so you can design like certain regions to be double woven. So when you double weave it, it actually produces 2 separable fabrics. So you can see I can separate pockets in my work here. I don't know if that's showing, but I am pulling apart the 2 sides of the fabric in this region. And you can have really distinct designs on each side. So I started playing around with designing each side separately, then integrating them into a double weave. So this was my first experiment. I was just playing around with smaller squares. And here you can see the aspect ratio of double weaving is a little different. This I didn't stretch or squash vertically at all. I just plugged it into the loom straight from Photoshop, and my circles turned out to be really nice. Because I guess in double weaving, like one weft thread packs down behind the other weft thread, which prevents them from really like stacking on top of each other and stretching the image out. So yeah, this is cool. I would like get a pillow or a blanket, or hell, I'd even wear like a nice like dress shirt in this fabric, because I like the navy and the red. So I kept playing around with this. This is 1 weft, 1 warp on both sides. And so I thought about extending it so that each warp thread actually got 2 wefts each. So 4 weft colors, 2 warp systems. So I guess it would be, I don't know notation. So it'd be like 2 weft and warp, 2 weft, 1 warp systems doubled. That makes sense to me. Anyway, so what I wanted to do was I wanted this whole idea of circles and circles on one side, triangles on the other. And then I wanted the circles to be shifting colors and the triangles to also be shifting colors. So you can see some things went wrong with this sample. The circles did get squashed because when I doubled up the weft, that made them pack down differently. And actually the triangle fabric turned out to be inverted. This is actually the wrong side of what I intended to show. Because when you plan, depending on how you integrate the 2 sides, I wanted the 2 sides to turn out like this. But the way I planned it, I took the 2 sides turned out like this. So that was something I had to learn how to flip when I was planning out the next sample. And then I also had to stretch it out. So my fixed version of that design is here. You can see the circles are a lot more circular. And the triangles are also on their proper, in the proper color. I am not really. Oh yeah, the colors also got switched, so I was figuring out like how do I get which color to show on which face. Anyway, I feel like I'm kind of getting lost in my head. I might be losing some people who are listening to this too. So on to like moving on from just experiments in certain concepts, and then I wanted to actually execute some ideas. And so ideas don't always come out correctly. My first idea that I wanted to come away with like a project, a usable object, is wanted just something positive for myself. So I designed something that said, good tidings will come. And I was really using this cool, sparkly thread is the next one. So I wanted to say good tidings will come on one side. When you flipped it over, it would show the phases of the moon. So if anyone sees the pun in that, but you can see it's not really a double weave. The two faces aren't separable because there was something in the way I processed the image. I must have not correctly done the double weave conversion. And so the two sides are really integrated. I mean, I think it's still kind of a look, but it's not the way I wanted it to turn out. It's something I'll still hang up as a reminder of beauty and imperfections. But the next idea I really wanted to execute, it actually came out well, so I'm glad. This will actually be a usable thing. It's going to be a double-sided door sign on my future room when I move to Boulder. And it says, speak friend and enter on one end. So, which is, if you are into Lord of the Rings, it is the, what is it? The saying on the gates to the mines of Moria. And so this leaf motif is actually taken from the door of the design of the door. I just looked up a picture and cut this out and integrated it into my design. And so it is double-sided. So this side says, speak friend and enter, saying like, oh, Chanel is welcoming guests into their room. And then the other sign says, kindly fuck off. Like when I'm not feeling like seeing people, I'm learning how to establish boundaries. Yeah, middle fingers. The leaf again, the leaf is shown on both sides. So that's reversible. And so yeah. I should make that a profile picture or something. Anyway. So that was it for my weaving work. Wow, that went on pretty long. But yeah, I learned so much, and I look forward to learning more when I start my PhD, because I'm basically working with smart textiles, so I'll be working with more exotic and unusual materials like wires and elastic materials, conductive threads. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that affects the fabrics that I'm weaving. But yeah, I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'll be back with knitting and spinning and the huge. Okay, now you're recording? Cool. So yeah, that ended up being a longer break than I intended it to be. I had a Skype call that I forgot I had scheduled, and then I was hungry afterwards, so I ate, and it's been a solid 2-hour break. Whoops. Anyway, so on to knitting. So, I have been working on quite a lot of things. Last episode, a lot of my projects were kind of obligation projects, or projects that were on commission, or otherwise just, for work. So I had a little personal resolution to cast on a couple of more personal projects, especially because leading up to the workshop, it just happened to be final season, so I was working overtime, covering for some of my coworkers at the store, and also tutoring way more hours than I usually was, because all of my students were in finals cram mode. So the workshop was really a vacation for me, and right before I spent some money on new yarn and treated myself to some yarn for personal projects that I had been meaning to do for a while. Well, one was, and I also cast on some projects just for fun. So one project I cast on, it was the project that a friend and I have been joking around about for a while. So Yarnia is doing a sock scuffle, and one night at knit night, Vincent the knit owl and I were joking around about how there are two teams, the toe up or cuff down. What about something that's in between or neither? And so I finally got to execute one of my ideas, which was a sock that actually starts at the cuff, goes around the toe, and then back up. So it really is both. It's also neither. And so I'm calling them the there and back again, or Taba socks, or slippers. And so these are the finished products. I do have two of them. These are from worsted weight yarn because I wanted it to work up quickly, but that's why they turned out to be more like slippers, but they're really cozy and cute. I think I am going to write the pattern for worsted weight and work out the math for maybe lighter weights later. But anyway, these are socks where I started, I cast on here at the front half of the cuff. And then I went down the foot and then around the toe, the sole in stockinette, and then the heel and the back of the leg in garter. So most of the slipper or sock is in garter stitch, so it went really quickly. So I had a couple of just like silly goals that, like restrictions that I set upon myself, because when you set them intentionally and for fun, restrictions can be a cool challenge. So these socks are knit completely flat and are not knit with any short rows, only increases and decreases. They were a fun experiment, and they are cozy. So I should be trying to test that as soon as I wrap up the roulotte test. The way I'm really happy with how the seams turned out. So basically, there's a plane there. So basically, once you knit, you have a piece that is knit on its own. It feels pretty much like a garter stitch scarf with a slip stitch edge until you get to the toe, until you decrease down to the toe. Then once you get around the toe tip, then you start, at the end of each row, you pick up a stitch along the edge. You slip your last stitch, pick up a stitch, pass the slip stitch over, and that joins your work to the rest of the sock. So look out for that test for the Taba socks or slippers. I was, at first I was kind of doubtful if I was going to write up a pattern for it, but then when I showed people it, they're like, "Ooh, that sounds fun, you should write the pattern for it." I'm like, okay. So that's the Taba socks. The next one is also an FO. And yeah, I started it like the night before I left for North Carolina, so like the 10th. And it's been a little over 2 weeks. It was a really quick knit. It is the Des chain top. So yeah, I didn't even really get to show you all as a whip or anything. I got the yarn. After I recorded last episode, I cast it on, cast it off, blocked it last night, woven the ends this morning, and it is done. So this is the Des chain top by Layla Robb, and it's a summer top knit in pieces, and then stitches are picked up for the sleeves. So it's a nice, easy construction. There's very little shaping, because it is meant for a like drapey, boxy fit. The yarn, I did not use the yarn that the pattern called for. The pattern was originally designed for Quince & Company, so it used a Quince & Company Kestrel, which is an Aran weight linen, or is it linen and cotton blend? Not sure. That yarn is not so easy for me to get. I mean, I'd have to order it online, and I saw that some people had substituted Kestrel for Juniper Moon Cumulus before, so I made that substitution. This is Juniper Moon Cumulus, which is like 94%. It's a weird number. So about 95% cotton, Mako cotton, so it's a really fine, soft cotton, and then 6% nylon for strength. And it's a chainette construction, so it's very airy, and it works up. I mean, it's very flexible in its gauge, but it can work up to like an open Aran weight gauge, like the Kestrel. Yeah, and on Ravelry, I did some research and saw that people had made that substitution before. So I decided to get that because that's also at the store, so I could just cast it on right away and didn't have to wait for shipping. So yeah, one property I found of the Cumulus versus the Kestrel. The Kestrel is linen. So the linen drapes a lot more than cotton. And it could be the nature of how this particular cotton yarn is constructed, but this definitely is floofier, more springy, and does not drape as much, so it produces a squishy fabric, which is nice. I really like the feel of this. And I think it gives the lace stitch down the front some nice body, because there are garter ridges in there that give it some nice texture. But then there's also, it opens up in the drop stitches too, which, as the designer said in her notes, really modernizes this shale lace panel. And like I said, there's very little shaping. These are just knit flat. It's just stockinette. And then you pick up the sleeves. Once you seam up the shoulders, you pick up the sleeves for a very short sleeve. The pattern told me to knit to 8 inches, but I mean, I'm probably shorter than the model, and 8 inches would have been about bracelet length on me, whereas the sample definitely shows a 3/4 length sleeve, and I wanted that fit, so I knit it to about 6 inches, so 2 inches shorter. Yeah, so it fits about here for me. I'm not gonna put it on because that would be really awkward to finagle. I mean, I probably would take off this shirt and and put this on, so I strip on camera, I guess. But actually, when I tried this on this morning, it fits pretty similarly to the shirt I'm wearing now. So I'll definitely wear this thing. And I love the red, because I know I can pull off this color since my skin tone's kind of on the medium side. So this kind of like saturated coral red really works. And I feel like I should wear this more. It's just I usually end up wearing grays and blues and browns. So, oh, by the way, the colorway name is Ruby. And it was really nice knitting someone else's pattern for a change. The Tabasocks were fun, but it was still like I was knitting it with a different mindset than if I was following a pattern. I did start it out as a design, not as a formal design, it's still a different mindset than if I knew I would be writing it up eventually. I'm just focusing my camera. But it was still, I was making it up as I went. This was like, honestly, like following a pattern now has become more mindless for me. And I have to be less self-aware. If I have to make any modifications, then I pay attention a little more, but I can just zone out and have someone else tell me what to do. It's kind of this weird mindset I've gotten into since I started designing. So yeah, I did make two modifications. I added an extra repeat of the lace for my size, and this was the smallest size, by the way. Because of the way the Cumulus doesn't drape vertically as much, working the pattern as it was written would have made the shirt really short. And still, like, it's a like nice cropped length on me now. It's like at my natural waist, and I didn't want it any shorter than that because I wear a lot of high-waisted shorts, but I like my shirts to at least meet at the belt line of those high-waisted bottoms. Okay, and then the second modification I made was actually on the back piece. I added 2 sets of short rows, so 2 on each side, using the German short row method to just add some height at the back of the neckline. So just sit a little more nicely. I noticed that I usually do have to make some adjustment for my shoulders. I think I have pretty broad athletic shoulders for my frame. So yeah, that is the Des chain top. Really would recommend the pattern. I would really recommend this yarn. I would love to try Quince & Company's yarn. I should try to get some after I move. I am in such a weird headspace with my projects because of I know that I'm going to be packing up and moving everything soon. So those are my two FOs. The rest of my projects that I want to talk about are whips. So I have two sock whips. And you have seen these before last episode. This is the laundry day socks. So again, these are like the contrasting toes and heels and the main body of the sock. I am knitting them for a friend of, they're called the laundry day socks because I'm knitting them for a friend of mine who did laundry for me. And she requested socks as compensation, which I'm happy to knit for her. So, I can't remember how far along I was when I last showed you them, but I actually finished them, and then I had her try it on, and the cuff turned out to be too tight. I think she had originally provided me, like, kind of her calf measurement that did turn out to be wider than her foot. I completely forgot about that detail when I was knitting the legs, and so they turned out to be too tight on her calf. That was good for me to know. So I got home and cut out the bind off, and I ripped out the legs of the sock back to right above the heel here. So once I picked up those stitches, and now I've actually increased a few stitches along each side. So 4 on each side, a total of 8, which should add about 1.5 to 2 inches to the sock's full circumference. And yeah, I added 8 because this is a repeat of 4 stitches, so that would increase a stitch repeat on each side since I'm knitting these magic loop, 2 at a time magic loop. This texture is the Petty Harbor texture, which I really like. It's really easy to memorize. It's also really elastic too. So yeah, this should be a lot better for her. So I wanted to kind of follow up a bit on what I said last episode about sizing socks to fit someone else's feet. So I guess it's not so much about the feet anymore. I think I have that down. I also had one of the recipients of my other sock projects try his on, and the foot fits fine. So the foot fit fine, sheesh. That's kind of a tongue twister. On both pairs of socks that I had the recipients try on. But both of them found that the cuff was a little tight or too tough to get on. So I'm not sure how much of this is that commercial socks do tend to have stretchier cuffs. And how much of this is a quirk of just hand knit socks. But I am going to try to actively knit looser cuffs on my toe up socks. I think that might also be me knitting them toe up, though I haven't knit cuff down socks for anyone, so I don't know if they have that same complaints. But yeah, that's just something for me to keep in mind as I knit more socks for other people besides me. And I should see if that is true on the socks that I have knit for myself, just to see sizing. So the next sock whip, now that I know this adjustment I have to make, I'm making another pair of 2 at a time toe up socks, and this is the last set in the Hogwarts set that I talked about last episode. So this is going to be for a Slytherin. So you see this there, it's going to have silver toes. This is knitted with Gumball in Ghostly, and a green body. So this is actually a BFL wool from Ancient Arts in Old Growth Forest. So it's this really dark grayish green, which is reading kind of like olivey on the screen, but I feel it's actually it's more saturated in real life. So anyway, I am actually doing a bit of patterning here, and I'm making up the pattern as I go. This again might end up being a pattern, who knows? So I wanted this. I wanted to execute this idea of kind of a snake going up the foot of the sock. I'm not sure if it'll wrap around the back of the leg or just continue up the front of the leg. But anyway, these two rib lines are supposed to be kind of like the snake fangs, and then here, what I'm starting now is going to be the snake head, and then it's either going to be some sort of cable or lace pattern, basically that winds back and forth. So yeah, that's going to be fun. And that's all I had for knitting. So yeah, not too many knitting projects going on right now. I feel like they're all a little on the mindless side because I have been so busy. I don't really have the headspace for like a super challenging, like maybe huge shawl project, but also I'm not sure if I have, the motivation to do one because I'm not really in the market for a big, huge shawl. I might knit a shawl pattern as like a wall hanging for something. That's what I've been thinking about. I do have a pie shawl on my 2018 Make 9 list. Oh, by the way, Death Chain, I don't know if I said that. It was on my 2018 Make 9, and I really should do a check-in on Instagram about how I'm doing on that. Because this would be my 4th project completed off of it. This, excuse me, on the back of my couch, bed, sleeping mat, it was also on my Make 9. So yeah, I'm not doing too bad. Okay, but that's all I had for knitting. So let's do some spinning real quick. Yeah, I'm finishing up some of the spinning projects that I had promised to people who helped me out with getting my wheel. So this one I'm calling Stormy Skies. The fiber is from Three Waters Farm. It's their 80/20 BFL and nylon. I'm not sure if it's superwash, but wool blend. It was really nice to spin. And because it was pretty much a semi-solid and not variegated enough, I didn't think of doing any particular fancy color management. I just split the braid in fourths and spun it up and then applied it on itself. I had a little bit left over. This was probably the most even I've ever been on halves of a braid of fiber, whether I split it really evenly or I spun it really consistently. I only had like a few grams left over when I applied the two halves, so I put that in an Andean plying bracelet and actually spit spliced one of the halves. So then I was just like applying onto the halves, so it's all one skein. So yeah, and it has some nice drape. I just finished this. Yesterday was a huge like washing and blocking day for me. It was fun. I like taking my skeins out to the balcony now that it's warm and just whacking them against the railing. So that's good. So this next project was a little more involved. I got this like super colorful fiber, also from Three Waters Farm. I put in a big order to them. And this is their organic Polworth base. So also, these skeins all turned out to be pretty loosely, pretty drapey. So, but still, I say the BFL and the Polworth are both really bouncy wools. So the way I split the 4-ounce braid, I split it into, this is half, and these are quarter each. So you have about half the braid represented in my two hands here. So these two are more alike in that once I split it into quarters, I split each quarter in half again, and then spun the halves both in the same direction. And I tried to be as consistent as possible so that when I plied it, the colors would align and there would be minimal barber pulling. So there is some barber pulling, but I haven't, but it's overall like the same color applied on the same color, which it's not as matched as I would have liked, but I'm still practicing consistency. But I really like the bouncy texture that both of these skeins have. I have been kind of spinning with high twist and high ply twist, which makes these yarns a little bit stiff, but when I finish them, well, they were a little ropey when I got them off the wheel, but when I finished it, the pole was really floofed out. So I think this will be fun to knit with. And then this skein with the half, I went for maximal barber pulling, as you can tell. So this I fractal spun. So I split this in half and then split one half into thirds, I believe. So when in fractal spinning, you have the short repeats darting in and out the longer repeats, which translates to a lot of barber pulling, but in a really cool self-striping pattern. Yeah. So I think I'll get to... I have to check my notes on who these are going to, but I think I do get to keep one of these minis to have fun with. And maybe that will be a little bit of me contributing to the Summer of Skeins. So the last spinning project I have to show you is not about color management at all, because it was with a very tonal fiber. And this fiber is from Sweet Georgia. It's their Superwash BFL base. And each of these skeins are about 4 ounces. This is actually a spinning commission, my first spinning commission that I took on, so I have to figure out now pricing and how to value my labor for that. But a friend of mine in the knitting circle fell in love with my hand spun, which I put a skein of it in like a kind of a gift swap, and she was so sad that she didn't get that particular package in the gift swap, so she commissioned me, which is really nice of her and really flattering, because I still consider myself a fairly new spinner. But she wanted worsted to bulky weight, so I did use a bigger ratio than I usually do. My happy medium, my default yarn has definitely been like a sport or DK weight. So this I felt like I did have to actively draft out more wool to make a thicker yarn. So, but this is just a 2-ply. And then, as I mentioned before, some of my yarns have been turning out a little ropey, and I was kind of worried about that here. So I did spin with less, well, I spun with about the same amount of twist. When I was plying, instead of over-plying like I usually do, because I like that nice tight twist, I spun for just a balanced ply, and I really liked the drape of the yarn that came out with it. So because it was a balanced ply, I felt like there was a little bit less of a difference between finishing, before finishing, and after finishing. Because when I overply, my yarns really are unbalanced before finishing, and then when after finishing they are balanced, or they at least hang in an open loop instead of twisting up on itself. So yeah, I hope she enjoys them. I'll have to make like cute hand lettered labels or something for them, because yeah, I should look into spinning for people more. But also, Chanel, you don't have to monetize everything in your craft. Anyway, so that's all I have for directly crafty related things. So if you just wanted to see cool projects, and I hope they were cool and satisfied your expectations, but that's all the crafting I had, and the rest is going to be a bit of chatter. So I have a quick life update section, just reflecting on what's been going on. So outside of the workshop, now like my move is seeming really real. Well, the workshop was like, okay, this is a preview of what the next few years of my life is going to look like. And it went really well, which is a good sign. I feel like I did pick up the intuition of weaving pretty quickly. One thing was, I was definitely the only like techie person there, coming from a straight math and science background. Everyone else was definitely way more of an artistic path than I was. Mine, I would say I've always towed the line, or I've always been on the science track, looking over to the art side occasionally, but now I'm like, finally, now that I'm an adult and I get to do my own thing, I'm slowly meandering over to the art side. But keeping the science bit, because I do really enjoy the technical challenges that come with being in tech. And I hope to merge that with the creativity I get to express as an artist. So I'll see about that. But yeah, my move is getting really real. So I decided I am going to be road tripping from New Jersey to Colorado. I'm going to rent a car, a one-way rental, and load up all of my things. And then, yeah, just do kind of a 5 to 6 or 7 day road trip through the heartland of the country. So I already have some planned stops in Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Between Cincinnati and the Denver area, I have fewer plans. I do want to stop in Lawrence, Kansas, because one of my buddies from the workshop was there, and she says that that town is pretty cool. I might stop in St. Louis because it is pretty far between Cincinnati and Lawrence. But if anyone has suggestions along those legs of the route, or would like to meet up somewhere along the road, then yeah, contact me. Just let me know, hit me up. I would love to meet as many people as possible on my move / road trip / mini vacation that I'm giving myself before I start work. So yeah, but while I'm here before the move, I have been making a mental checklist of things to do before I leave the area. And most of them have to do with just like seeing the friends that will be very hard to see in person after I move. Because I have quite a lot of friends from college who ended up in the New York area, in New York City specifically. After we graduated, I've made a lot of friends here, which is going to be sad to be leaving them after such a short time here, but I feel like I never really settled in New Jersey. But yeah, hanging out with them. I want to plan some sort of like get together before I move, like a friend suggested a house cooling, because I'll probably also have some crap to get rid of. So like a housewarming, you arrive and you bring gifts for the person moving in. So for house cooling, if that person's moving out, that person can give some shit away, right? Like I have some like kitchen knickknacks that will be cluttering up my space, so I should just try to offload them. And yeah. Anyway, the reason why I'm road tripping is because I looked at the cost for like buying a flight to Denver, shipping my stuff over to my new place, and I was like, this is about the same cost as a one-way rental, and it'd be so much more fun if I drove, and met up with people along the way. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Before I move, some things on my to-do list. I want to go to some of the... I never got around to checking out some of the yarn stores in the area, so I definitely want to visit some of the stores in Brooklyn, like Brooklyn General, String Thing Studio. Let's see. I want to take the Staten Island Ferry. Yeah, little things like that. I shouldn't be too ambitious with my list because I am still going to be busy. But yeah, I really should try to enjoy myself more. And yeah, one thing, going back to the friends thing, I'm going to try to be better about finding community, when I get to the Denver area. And by community, I don't mean just friends, but people who are in my, what's the word for it? Like, in my certain demographics group, like my age range, my identities as a person of color, as queer, as disabled. So finding more community along those lines so that I'm not as isolated in my experiences. And yeah, I mean, here in the Newark area, there's a really good, I'm finding out about a strong cutie, queer and trans, including also two-spirit, intersex people, people of color community, cutie poc community that is very strong, and I'm sad that I have been missing out on it, and I'm just now discovering it. And I've already like made some amazing connections that through events there. So yeah, I don't think any of them will watch this, but I'm just really grateful that I've met them and I've gotten to experience what cutie pop community feels like, and the beauty of appreciating everyone in that space. Anyway, so that's that's all I have for life update slash reflection. So that brings me to wrap up. So let's see. A couple of notes I want to end on. We have so look out for the Roulotte Shawl, which will be published soon. The Druid Circle will be published towards the end of July, which is when I'm moving. I'm trying to get it out before I move, but if it has to happen after I move, that's fine too. And then I will be putting out a call soon for the Taba socks, there and back again. And so if you're interested in that, get in touch with me. And then one more thing that I'm excited to announce is that I will soon be... I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons with an awesome group of people. We're all knitters. And our DM, who is Melissa at Skane Nanigans on Instagram and Ravelry, has decided that she loves us so much, she's going to stream us playing. So, yeah, you should check out the Dungeons and Drop Stitches Ravelry group if you're interested or curious about Dungeons and Dragons soon. So, yeah. That's all I have for you all. Thanks so much for listening. Again, you can find me as Pipernell, Pipernell, basically everywhere on the internet. Though my Ravelry designs are under my actual name, or my legal name, Chanel Wu, SHANELWU. And I hope to see you again soon. Happy crafting, knitting, spinning, whatever makes your heart happy. Bye!